So, good afternoon. My name is Warren Mueller. I am Vice President of the Chicago Comp Association, playing host today. In my day job, I'm head of broad-based compensation for FTI Consulting. And I want to welcome you to this online offering of the Chicago Comp Association, Pay Transparency, Understanding How Rapidly Changing Legislation Will Impact Compensation Practices. So we all know that pay transparency has been impacting our jobs more and more over the last 5 years, and I think will grow exponentially over the next 5 years as well. So I'll introduce Liz and Lulu from PayScale here in a minute. I did want to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded. So if anyone is uncomfortable with the meeting being recorded, then we understand. Give you permission to leave at this time. That will likely include the chat and any audio or video recordings as well. The slides will be shared and available with the recording at the end of this presentation. So we will get the slides out to you as well. And before I jump into the content for the day, I will let you know about some of the upcoming events for the Chicago Comp Association. On December 6th, we have the Experts Forum, which will be a roundtable of compensation practitioners getting together and discussing trends and themes of the day. So December 6th is out on our website, available for registering. Chicago Comp Association website. We also have our next virtual event is January 10th. That'll be Market Data Best Practices with Justin Hampton from the Comp Tool, and Brian Briscoe, who is Vice President of Marriott Rewards, and I think a survey vendor as well, talking about best ways to handle market data from a vendor, market data management, and a practitioner point of view. We're looking to get an in-person event scheduled in December, so keep your eyes on your email for that. Also, we're planning on launching a World at Work in-person course in Q1. So if you're on your way for CCP certification, GRP, global certification, or total rewards path with World at Work, we should be able to assist you with your in-person learning in Q1. And my final plug is that if any of you are members of the Chicago Comp Association, but you are not members of World at Work, World at Work is offering a 30% discount for dual membership right now. So if you ever wondered about being a member of the national or global organization World at Work, you wanted to access their resources, right now they're offering 30% off. So you can contact me or anyone on the board to get linked into the right codes to use when registering with World at Work for that. So now we're up to 48 people. Go to the Chicago Comp Association website, check out our upcoming events. We're very active during this time of year, of course, leading up to our big annual summit that will be in May or June, kind of a day of learning type event. So we've got a great LinkedIn page that publishes our events and other sort of best practices. So our LinkedIn page and our website, Chicago Comp Association. So with that, I will bring in Liz and Lulu from PayScale, and they will talk about pay transparency here. Now, Liz and Lulu.
Thank you, Warren. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. So thank you again, Warren, and the Chicago Comp Association for having Lulu and I today. One of our favorite topics is pay transparency, and we're excited to talk about it with you. As our tagline says, we are all trying to understand how rapidly changing legislation, especially for you folks in Illinois, I know something big is coming in January, and how that will impact compensation practices. So quick intro. My name is Liz Sheffield. I'm the manager of content marketing for PayScale. So I work with our editorial team and content team to produce a variety of reports, white papers. Lots of those have been on pay transparency this year. And prior to joining PayScale, I've been writing about HR and compensation for about a decade. And prior to that, I was in HR as a practitioner for Starbucks Coffee Company. So Lulu, if you want to give a quick intro about yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Lulu Cycli. I am the Senior Corporate Employment Counsel for PayScale. I've been with PayScale almost 2 years now. Before that, I was in the law firm world as an employment lawyer for the last decade, working at law firms like Littler Mendelsohn. I was a litigator. Really excited to have joined PayScale almost 2 years ago. And as part of my job, outside of being in-house counsel for PayScale, I work alongside Liz and her team, and I track all of the pay transparency, pay equity, pay reporting legislation globally. And I get to do events like this with my good friend Liz to talk about it and hopefully be able to explain it in more bite-sizable chunks because, lawyers tend to talk in legalese, and I'm sorry for the entire profession on behalf of that. But wanted to just say one quick thing before Liz jumps in. If y'all have any questions, throw them in the chat. We're hoping to have a good chunk of time at the end to be able to answer some of your questions. So please feel free to use the chat.
Okay, so a quick 3 points. This is general agenda. As Lulu said, we would love your questions. We like to have this as conversational as possible. So we will be talking about pay communication legislation, past, present, and future. One thing we often say is even if you're not in a state with pay transparency, it's coming to a state near you and soon. So thank you all for joining us. I think it will prepare you. We're going to talk about pay transparency, how it impacts employers as well as employees, and then most importantly, how you can all respond and prepare. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, we are curious, and if you want to type your response in the chat, you don't have to if you don't want to, but would you rather ask a colleague what color underwear they're wearing, if they've ever been arrested, or what they make in terms of their salary? I can't see the chat. Are we getting any responses?
Yeah,
Lulu?
we got one if they've ever been arrested, one what they make, arrested, what they make, arrested, arrested. No underwear. We're not seeing the underwear one. It's a toss up between arrested and what they make.
Okay.
Well, this is all comp professionals, so maybe it's a little biased.
That's true. You're right. It is biased, but often we find that people are, yes, I would much rather ask about arrests or the color of underwear versus pay. So that it's a little bit of a sign of the transition in the times, right? That with legislation, as well as kind of a generational movement, we're seeing a lot more openness about pay, but some of us might still have a level of discomfort. If you've ever attended a PayScale webinar, event, what have you, you are familiar with our pay transparency spectrum. So it's important as we start this discussion, I think organizations really need to decide how transparent they will be. Folks might be thinking, oh no, legislation means you have to share everything. And that's not the case. It's really a degree to which you're open and want to communicate about pay information internally and externally. So you see on one far end of the spectrum, it's pay confidentiality, right? That's only the very bare minimum is being shared about pay. Basically, what's on your pay stub, that's what we're communicating to you. Then on the far right, we have like fully open pay transparency where salary ranges are public, and it's very, very open. And somewhere in between, we've got level 2, information on how pay is determined is shared with individuals and employees. At a level 3, the range for someone's current job might be shared as well. And level 4, that's when the managers are really able to facilitate those meaningful conversations. So it's not, I don't want to say that everybody, you are on one point and that's it. People move up and down the pay transparency spectrum depending on what's going on in the organization. But this is kind of a place to hopefully add some reassurance that it is a spectrum and you don't have to just open all the books, so to speak. And I bet what you're really here for is the legislation, which Lulu is our expert and can share about this.
Well, so for the legislation piece, I just want to let y'all know, buckle up. It's going to be a little dense. We're going to try and make it as easy to understand as possible. Again, please use the chat. I guess the next slide, please, Liz. So I don't know about y'all, but I am a part of the group of people that's rewatching Suits and binge watching Suits all over again after all of the WGA strikes and the SAG strikes. But what we want to make clear here is that everything that we're talking about today is not legal advice. That's something that we want to just make abundantly clear. Although I am an attorney, I'm here to just talk to y'all about what the laws actually say. If y'all have questions on how to apply those within your organizations, please make sure you're talking to your own legal counsels. This link at the bottom, which we'll have again at the end for y'all to get to, and I think Becky's going to send the slide deck to y'all. We track all of the US, Canada, and European pay transparency legislation in as close to real time as possible. So if you ever have a question, if you're a multi-state employer, if you ever have a question about whether a state has pay transparency that you're supposed to comply with, check out our website. It's there. We have links to the legislation itself. If you follow Liz or myself or connect with us on LinkedIn, I'm always posting as quickly as I can whenever I find out about something new and exciting in the world of pay transparency or pay equity or pay reporting legislation. So wanted to provide you, we have a ton more resources we're going to show at the end, but this is just one of them. So pay is not so secret anymore. This is not a secret to most everybody on this call, I imagine, but kind of wanted to show y'all, I'm a very visual learner, a visual person, but kind of wanted to show y'all how we got to where we are today. Back in 1935, the National Labor Relations Act was kind of the first behemoth piece of legislation on the federal level that basically protected an employee's right to communicate their pay. Like it no longer was taboo for an employee to talk freely about their pay. They couldn't be fired or demoted or disciplined for doing so. And then we waited almost 100 years for our next kind of piece of behemoth legislation in this space for salary history bans. So back in 2016, Massachusetts was the first state to pass salary history bans. I asked this question at a conference, I think it's when we were in Texas, Liz, and I said, who knows anything about salary history bans? And like no one raised their hand. And then I said, well, you guys know that you guys can't ask candidates about how much they're making. They're like, oh yes, we know what that is. So that's what a salary history ban is. It's the laws in a bunch of states and a bunch of cities that say you as an employer, when you're interviewing candidates, can't ask them how much they're currently making. So that way you're, potentially lowballing them on an offer if they make it far enough along the process. So to date, we have 29 states plus Washington, D.C., plus a lot of other municipalities that have this in place. And in fact, even with states that don't have it, it's become practice amongst most organizations to not ask this question during the interview process. Then in 2018, we had our first our dip into the water of what a pay transparency legislation could look like. California, of course, was the first state to pass a law that said, hey, so if a candidate is interviewing with you and they ask you what that salary range looks like, you're going to have to give it to them. So that was kind of the first step into what we know as pay transparency today. And we have a bunch of states that followed suit. It took a while, but we have a bunch of states that follow suit. But it wasn't until 3 years later, Colorado was the first state to say, hey guys, asking about salaries during the interview process is not enough. We need this to be more out in the open. We are going to require employers to post ranges in black and white on job postings. So that is the pay transparency we talk about now. There are no laws as of yet for the private sector that requires employers to post publicly their salaries on the internet for everyone to see. So that's like the 5 on the spectrum that Liz was talking about. So when we talk about pay transparency and legislation, I kind of see it, again, visual person here, I kind of see it in 3 buckets. We've got 2 buckets that are kind of together, which is pay transparency. So that's providing the range during the interview process. That's like the verbal pay transparency. Then we've got the second bucket, which is, hey, you got to put it in black and white in job postings. And then we have this new piece of legislation that's emerging. It's pay communication. And in fact, Illinois tried passing this piece of legislation. It did not pass this legislative session about communication. We'll talk about what that means in a little bit, but I imagine that's not the end of it for Illinois. All right, so like Liz mentioned, pay transparency is coming to a state near you. If y'all have been listening closely, you've heard me say y'all a lot. I live in Dallas, Texas. Pay transparency is probably not coming to Texas anytime soon. It probably will come to Texas if there's a federal law that comes to it. However, we in Texas are attracting a lot of kind of the Silicon Valley type of companies. So in order for companies, in Austin, for example, to compete with, San Francisco and San Jose and Seattle, kind of the tech booms, they're going to have to be posting ranges regardless, even though it's not required under law. 2023 was a really, really busy year for pay transparency. We saw over a dozen states and Washington, D.C. and United States Congress propose some sort of pay transparency legislation. The states in red, believe it or not, the states in red did propose pay transparency laws, but they failed. I was very surprised when I saw some of these states like West Virginia and Kentucky and South Dakota and Montana, states that are quite conservative, proposing pay transparency legislation. Not surprising, unfortunately, it has failed in those states. I don't think it's the end of it. So we'll see what happens in the next session. The states in in navy/black, the darker states, are states where pay transparency laws have either passed or are still pending. And Susan has asked a really good question. Why do, quote, red states oppose pay transparency laws? We have been seeing that most of the states that do pass pay transparency laws tend to pass them along party lines. So if you live in a more democratic state with more democratic representatives, you're more likely to have pay transparency as opposed to a more conservative state that doesn't. My opinion about this is that a lot of businesses are really opposed to pay transparency. So we have like the business organizations and the small businesses going to the government and saying, we don't want to do this. This is a lot of work on our end, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think it is, but who actually knows? And then we see the pay transparency landscape. So again, pay transparency is coming to a state near you. It's already come to Illinois. I guess it'll come to Illinois in about a year from now. But we estimate at PayScale that 1 in 4 workers live in a state with some sort of pay transparency requirement. That's a huge number of workers, especially if you are a remote company. So I tell folks in Texas all the time, if you're hiring remote workers, you're going to have to post a range because the laws say that you have to. Even if you are only intending on hiring in Texas, if that job says remote work, you could potentially be capturing candidates in California, in Illinois, in New York, in Washington, in Hawaii, from 2 months from now, etc. So the states in gold are the states that have passed pay transparency laws that say you have to post the ranges in black and white. The states in blue have laws on the books that say you have to provide the range during the interview process. So we're seeing it. It's coming. It's coming maybe a little bit slower than we anticipated, but it is still coming. So this is kind of a timeline that we keep internally for our sake at PayScale to kind of see what the pay transparency wave looks like and how quickly it's coming. So we saw 2022 had kind of a good chunk of pay transparency ordinances. I say ordinances because a lot of cities, particularly in New York and New Jersey, passed laws requiring pay transparency. And then we saw this year, Washington State, California, and New York State enact pay transparency. Hawaii will be next in about a month and a half. And then y'all in Illinois have a whole year to prepare. Next January of 2025 is when y'all's come. When we talk about salary range, that's a good question, Susan. When we talk about salary range, the language says on most of the laws that you have to post a range that you in good faith believe you're going to pay for the role. That could mean the entire range of the job that you're posting. That could mean the 25th to 75th percentile. What I'm pretty sure it doesn't mean is $90,000 to $900,000. We've seen a lot of companies do that. Washington State, there are now a bunch of class actions now in Washington State against companies like Nike and Marriott and really large organizations because they're either not posting ranges or they're posting too wide of ranges. Remember, the pay transparency laws were enacted to help candidates negotiate their salaries. if you're giving them $1 million range, how the heck is someone supposed to negotiate that salary? They have no idea where they're supposed to start, right? So good faith range. Just think about it like that when you are looking at posting your ranges. And at PayScale, we can also help you kind of figure that out too. But let's talk specifically about what the Illinois law is going to require. And y'all's legislators were really kind to allow you guys a full almost year and a half to get your ducks in a row to prepare for the law. I think it's probably because y'all had the pay reporting requirement enacted this year. So it was a lot of stuff for comp professionals in Illinois. But beginning January 1, 2025, if you have 15 or more employees in Illinois, and the job posting will be physically performed, at least in part in Illinois, or the role reports to somebody based in Illinois, then you're going to have to post a range. This language was taken verbatim from the New York State law. So this New York State and Illinois are the only two states who have laws on the books that don't require general remote work to have salary ranges in them to comply with their laws. So Illinois said we have to have a touch point to the state of Illinois for for an employer to post a range. So when we say will physically be performed at least in part in Illinois, think about your traveling sales employees. If you're traveling sales employees, maybe they're based in Austin, but their territory is Illinois. They come to Illinois a couple times a year. You're probably going to have to post a range for that role, right? If you are hiring a general remote worker, but their supervisor is based in Chicago, you're going to have to post a range. Or the work site is based in Chicago that they report to, you're going to have to post a range. This also is going to apply to internal job postings. So if you have internal transfers or internal promotions, you're going to have to post ranges for those. And you're going to have to include either the actual wage. So we get this question all the time is like at PayScale, for example, our account executives, our sales teams all make the same. There's no range. All make the same, but their commissions are the things that fluctuates in their salary. When we post our range for our account executive team, we're allowed to just post one salary. This is the amount. There's no negotiation here. In Illinois, you're allowed to do that, or you can post a range, and it can either be an hourly range or a salaried range. And again, you'll see this language. It's the good faith standard range. So it's not, I will put money. This is legal advice. I know I told y'all I'm not giving legal advice, but this is legal advice. $90,000 to $900,000 is not a good faith range. You can quote me on that one. And then Illinois, similar to states like Washington and New York, also are going to require y'all to post a general description of benefits and other compensation, which y'all probably already do. All this means is you have to say that this role is eligible for unlimited PTO and 401k matching and healthcare benefits and, you know, pet insurance and fertility treatment, whatever amazing benefits y'all offer. You just have to generally post those in the job postings. Do you need to post the full salary range, or can you decide to post perhaps the minimum to midpoint? You can do that. That's a good faith range. All the laws say, Illinois is not as explicit, but I imagine it's probably going to be just as flexible. Most of the laws say that if you post a range, you can offer more than what the range predicts. And we see that with our customers all the time at PayScale. They say, we want to post between the 25th and 75th percentile. We want to have buffer room on either end to be able to negotiate based on kind of the qualified candidates that we see. You can do that. That's fine. But make sure when you're offering more than the posted range, you're offering it based on compensable factors. You're not offering it based on someone's age or someone's gender or someone's race, you know, all of those kind of protected classes that can get you into trouble. So pay communication is the other legislative landscape I talked about briefly. California and Rhode Island are the two states that have laws on the books right now about pay communication. In California, the law says that if an employee comes to you and asks you what their range is, you have to give it to them. Seems like a no-brainer. California decided to codify that. Rhode Island, it's a little bit more employer work. So not only do you have to provide a range if someone comes to you and says like, hey, I'm a senior corporate counsel at PayScale. I'd like to know the range of my position. In Rhode Island, you also have to provide that information on a yearly basis to your employees. So that's like maybe during your comp cycles, maybe that's on their comp statements, that senior corporate employment attorneys at PayScale make between I don't know, $100,000 and $300,000 a year. That's a wide range, but that was the only range that came to my head. But maybe like that's what that looks like. Like I mentioned, Illinois, the state Senate had a proposal for paid communication and did not pass. So I have to update this map. Colorado, Pennsylvania, Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts also have pending legislation on the books regarding this. So we'll be watching that out. And then Massachusetts, and I meant to talk about this a little bit earlier, Massachusetts is probably going to be the next state to pass pay transparency legislation. It is moving quite quickly through the state legislatures. So we're watching that very closely. Again, if y'all want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I will be the first to post about it. If y'all are multi-state employers and Massachusetts is really important to y'all, feel free to connect. I'm happy to share any information I have. And then, like I mentioned, just very briefly, in the United States Congress, there is a proposed Salary Transparency Act right now pending. I don't think this is going to go anywhere, at least not this session. But again, they have not reinvented the wheel. If it passes, this will apply to the entire country, that employers will be required to provide the wage range for their role upon hire and at least annually and upon the employee's request. So this is not only a pay transparency law, this is a pay communication piece of legislation. And then across the pond, the EU Pay Transparency Directive, if y'all are a global employer, we are watching this very closely. So earlier in the spring, the EU Parliament and Commission passed something called the EU Pay Transparency Directive. Part of the directive has a pay transparency component in it. And what we're waiting on now is that each of the 27 member states, so the member states include, France and Germany and Spain and Portugal and all those countries, each of the countries have to pass their own laws to comply with the directive. So there's nothing pending immediately right now in the EU. We're now just waiting for each of the 27 member states to pass their own laws. But it's coming to Europe. And the big piece of news across the pond is whether the United Kingdom will also follow suit, since they're not part of the EU. But since everything is so tightly knit in terms of the workforce in Europe, whether they'll follow suit. And then I wanted to bring up Canada, our neighbors to the north. We've got two provinces, I guess, that have pay transparency laws enacted: Prince Edward Island and British Columbia. British Columbia was just a week ago. They enacted their pay transparency law. Newfoundland and Labrador have a pending piece of legislation. It's not going anywhere yet. And then Ontario was the big news for this week. Ontario is going to soon introduce legislation, pay transparency legislation. It's tabled until November 14th, so next week. That piece of legislation is very similar to what we see on the US side, but the most interesting piece of this legislation for you legislative nerds / AI nerds is that there's going to be a component that's saying that if employers use AI when they're if they're scouring resumes or the applications during the interview process, during the application process, that employers will be required to disclose that they use AI during their hiring processes. So that is a really interesting addition to the Ontario piece of legislation. I imagine we'll see it in Europe. I imagine California will probably follow suit and Washington will follow suit. But stay tuned for that as well.
Thank you, Lulu. So I wonder if I'm a legislative nerd. This just kind of hit me when you used that phrase.
You are. You definitely are.
Okay.
We welcome you to the team.
Thank you. So yes, it's legislative, but it's also out there on the socials. So we usually we have a video of some of you. I'm curious if anyone has ever come across Hannah from Salary Transparent Street. She is an enterprising young woman who has gone out there with her microphone, as you can see it. Warren, it looks like you might have seen Hannah, and she just asks people, how much do you make? She's been all over. So I pulled some of her. She was in Loudoun County, Virginia, asked an HR professional, what do you make? That person shared. Somebody was a recruiter in Washington, D.C., he shared. And even this was at our booth at the World at Work conference in San Diego this past year, asked a compensation consultant. So yes, there's all this legislation, but there's also literally salary discussions going on the street. So what's the impact of these things on people? We have a bunch of sort of stats to just reflect what is happening. So according to our Fair Pay Impact Report, employees who work for a very opaque organization not sharing much are 183% more likely to leave relative to a highly transparent organization. So that, I mean, we are all aware of retention, the importance of keeping our people. Pay transparency is impacting that. Some interesting stats from SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. 66% of organizations that include pay ranges on job postings say that doing so has increased the quality of the applicants that they are seeing. They're on the right. Again, the same research, 65% of organizations that are including pay ranges said that it's making them more competitive in attracting talent. So on the one hand, you've got better quality candidates, and then you are more competitively attracting top talent. This Lulu refers to something about caller ID. You know, back in the day, we'd answer the phone, right? You didn't have caller ID, just, you know, just answer, see who it is. But now, yeah, I'm not answering my phone if I don't recognize that number on the caller ID. Kind of the same with pay transparency, right? I want to know what the salary range is. If I'm out there looking for a job, I want to know before I'm submitting my application. Some more stats. 73% of workers are more likely to trust organizations that provide the salary range. Nearly 44% of current job postings already are including salary ranges. So that kind of related to what Lulu was saying about if you're in Austin, it's not required for you to, per Texas law, it's not required for you to post a range. But if you're trying to recruit anybody from San Francisco or Seattle or another state where there are laws in place, it's going to put you at a disadvantage if you're not including that range. 70% of organizations say that including ranges has generated more applicants. And then, as we mentioned earlier, 1 in 4 Americans live in a state with pay transparency laws, which let that sink in. That's amazing.
I think it's actually going to be slightly higher now, because I think we got this number before New York State was enacted in September. So I think we'll probably revisit this number in January after Hawaii gets passed.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. I've been in the workforce for a while, and I honestly never thought this day was going to come. And final bit of data from us, according to research that we did related to our retention report, pay transparency decreases the likelihoods of someone seeking a job by 30%. That varies a little bit based on generation, but again, retaining people as a top priority, this has an impact. Okay, so how are people responding? We've given you a lot of information about legislation, about what's out there, and what impact it has. Becky, I think, is gonna share a poll real quick. There it is. We would love to hear, how transparent is your organization to date? And we have those levels again there, but if you want to read those choices and make your selection, we'd love to read the room, so to speak, read the virtual room. We'll give you a few seconds.
I have to share this story because Liz and I were doing this presentation at the Texas Total Rewards Conference earlier this summer. And we got to this slide and we were talking about, where do people fall kind of on the spectrum? And we talked that at PayScale, we are probably somewhere between a 3 or a 4. We don't anticipate ever getting to a 5 at PayScale. That is our kind of like internal philosophy, is that, we want to equip managers with the right tools to have meaningful conversations about pay. We share salary range data with our employees. So during comp time, they understand kind of how we came to their raises and things like that. And we had this guy raise his hand and say, well, why wouldn't you want to share them publicly? Like, he started fighting with us about it. Like, he was like offended that we didn't want to share our ranges publicly. And we said, it's not, the law doesn't require it. The law only requires that you post ranges, for candidates on the job postings. And this is something that we talked about internally at our organization, and each organization has to kind of figure it out for themselves, what they want to do. So of course, we definitely would love to see everyone towards the middle of the spectrum, but we definitely don't expect anybody to be at a 5 unless you're a public entity, because public entities have to do that.
And here are the results.
Oh, look at that.
Okay, so it's kind of, I studied English, so this math stuff gets to me, but divided by thirds, right? 30% no information is shared except for their own. Information on how their pay is determined is shared, and then salary range data for current role. Okay, so we have a lot in the 1 to 3, and maybe looking more at evolving to 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I just had a thought. Oh, and I guess we didn't really touch on it. Something I usually talk about is so we've sort of hinted at it, but that generational piece, and just in the past, how it was totally taboo to talk about pay, right? So it's a big evolution sort of in our culture, or kind of our ways of being that impacts it. Like Lulu said, we had the one person in that room that was like, well, why wouldn't you want to share pay ranges? And then on the other side, it was kind of ironic that they were on opposite sides of the room. A woman spoke up and said, it's no business what money I make. You shouldn't know that. So it just plays out. And that's what you're all dealing with, right, in your day-to-day conversations with employees. So what are employers doing? We recommend, let's go back to the people that we're serving here. And what do they want to know about pay? The very most basic thing. So, folks that are giving their pay statement, people want to know, what's my pay and total reward offering? I think I have one other thing here. Yeah. We have a compensation best practices report, and we asked about, hey, what are you communicating to your employees in terms of a total reward statement? And so in our last 2023 report, 42% said, yeah, we include both total cash and the value of benefits, which, side note, I mean, you've got to include that, right? The benefits piece, I'm a big proponent of that. And the other group, yes, we provide a total reward statement, but it's only cash compensation. So 57% of folks are communicating openly about that sort of level 1, answering the question of employees, what's my total reward offering? I think I'm going to interject this into my own thoughts here, that sometimes people are worried with pay transparency, but people are going to see that they could make $10,000 at this other company that they can't make with us. And that's where, like, a total rewards statement, or just being clear about those other benefits, you can really, it's, hey, we have a flexible work environment. You can work from home. We give you money to go to a gym, or pet care,
Pet
bills,
insurance.
yeah, pet insurance,
or equity, even equity.
right. So the more that you can include sort of in that communication about here's what you're getting, it really helps in terms of making yourself competitive as an employer. You're going to add something, Lulu? No?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. Okay, back to other things. These are the 4 top things that we see employees want to know about. There's your total pay reward, but then how is my pay determined? A lot of times, again, in the past, I think it was like an image of people in the back room with the dartboard saying, okay, yeah, Lulu, we're going to give her this much of a raise. So if you can share with them that type of information, or how does my pay compare to that of others? So that's not saying, hey, Liz, Lulu makes X. It's saying, Liz, you in your role, this is your range. There are other people in your role in the company, and they are somewhere on this range too. And then naturally, how can I progress my pay? What can I do to make more money? We are all probably 99.9% of us working because we want to make money and maybe make more money. So being open and honest about what are, promotion opportunities, what are my development opportunities, that can really help with this conversation. You might be sitting here going, okay, maybe I'm an HR team of 1, maybe I have a compensation team of 1. we are really looking at how HR and comp teams can empower managers. Y'all, I work with Lulu so much that I live in Seattle, but now I'm adopting the y'all. You and your teams have a lot on your plate anyway, and this is a time when we can really work with managers and empower them. They are having these conversations. People are seeing something out there in a job posting. They're going to come to their manager first and say, "What's this? How about this money?" So managers now really have a critical role in pay communications. And our next bullet there, that when they feel confident, then the employees feel confident. Nothing worse than going to your manager. In the past, maybe they'd say, go talk to HR. But we want that confidence from our manager that they understand what's the philosophy around pay at our organization. What do they know and can share with these employees? So it takes some investment, takes some time to coach those managers and help them learn how to navigate the conversations, but it's really beneficial. Again, back to our compensation best practices report, we looked at the difference in 2022. About 36% of organizations said that they were training their managers about pay communications, and then by 2023, probably somewhat due to pay transparency laws going into play, that was almost up to half of the organizations saying that they were training managers on pay communications.
I want to brag about PayScale a little bit here. So just to give you guys kind of an idea, PayScale has grown by acquisition. We've acquired 3 companies in the last 2 years. So this year was kind of our first year where we kind of cohesively leveled everybody, did like our pay equity checks, etc. But it was also the first year during our comp cycle where our HR team and our compensation team did trainings for not only managers, but for our individual contributors as well. So they did the manager training about like, this is how we got to pay. These are the questions that you may anticipate. These are the answers. You know, this is like a helpful guide for you if you get stuck. You don't want to say the wrong thing. But then we also did a training for those that weren't managers to say like, this is what the conversation with your manager is going to look like. This is the data sets we use to come up with your pay. This is the increases we gave, and this is why, etc. So we equipped everybody from individual contributors all the way up to managers on how to have thoughtful conversations around pay. And it was really successful. Like it was incredibly successful. And I think we measured success by the few questions that our people team got after those compensation conversations. But like we said in a few slides ago, is that if employees understand how they're being paid, they have more faith in an organization and they're less likely to leave.
Yeah, I think it's fair to, as somebody who's received that, it really has worked well what PayScale has done. So this is, Lulu, what do you want me to review?
Sure, I'll talk okay. Through this really quickly. So we talk all the time to compensation professionals about why organizations aren't communicating pay. And these are kind of the responses we get all the time. We're not confident in our pay ranges. We need to invest in some sort of pay communication platform. Maybe that includes the actual platform. Maybe that includes data sources. We need to train our managers to have these type of pay conversations. We want to conduct a pay equity analysis first. We're big proponents of pay equity analyses here at PayScale, making sure that you're paying your folks equitably internally before offering a role to somebody outside that may skew your pay equity analysis. We don't have time. There are a lot of organizations that are a compensation team of 1, or maybe even an HR team of 1 that have to do everything. So it's really difficult to do that. It's not a priority or something else. So we've got this amazing checklist that we like to talk through with our customers and our prospectives. And y'all, please feel free to use it. When y'all get it, either you can take a screenshot now or when you get the deck later. But this is kind of what we see are the steps to getting to pay transparency. And that's pay transparency in job postings. That's pay transparency, internal communications. But it's really all about getting your house in order. You can't just, like Liz was saying, you can't just like throw a dart on a wall and say, today I feel like paying my engineers $1.2 million. Like that's how lawsuits happen. That's not what you want in turn for your house to be in order. But read through this. I'm not going to read all through it, but if y'all have any questions, we're able to help y'all at PayScale. If you have no idea where to start, we have amazing folks and compensation professionals who can help kind of navigate what you kind of where you need to start and what you need to do. And then I think so we have a giveaway for a chance to win some AirPods Pro. If you take a picture of the QR code, it'll take you to that site. And then there are, that'll take you also to the legislation tracker, like we were talking about, and a CBPR compensation best practices report. We are actually just starting to collect data for our 2024 compensation best practices report. So if you'd like to participate, we'd love to have your input on that. And I think we are now ready for questions. That's the same QR code, just yes. FYI from before. But I don't know, Warren, if I don't see any newer questions in the chat. Oh, here we go. This is from Janice. She says, thanks for this. At least 6 of us on this call specialize in communicating comp. Yay, good.
Yay.
Are you finding employers just wanting to share pay ranges in hiring, or are they more willing to explain things like job families and pay ranges? I think it's just they want to explain it during hiring. I think we're still getting a lot of companies and employers who are saying we're not quite comfortable with like explaining things yet. We just want to comply with the law, get our feet underneath us before we take an additional step. Liz may have different interactions with some of our customers though.
I think I do agree, Lulu, that like that's the primary step. I think some of the folks that I've spoken with and worked with have sort of gone on to, I would say, like the next step
level.
There's a Expedia. I know that they have, I mean, a huge organization, right? And talk about like complex. Someone had asked about global, you know, they've got global, they've got folks all across the nation, and they have sort of like a frequently asked question spot that people can go to, an HR, you know, sort of service portal where people can ask those kinds of questions. So they are, maybe it's not like rolling out a big communication Janice to like, here's everybody, here's about pay ranges. But it's, they have things in place if people specifically want to know that information. And
actually this reminded me when we did our in-person like big conference just a few weeks ago, and one of the customers I spoke with said in their Workday, employees can go into their Workday portal and they can see their range and they can see the level above them and the range of the level, like the next level above them, which is great. But again, they don't like outwardly market that. It's just, you have to go in and find it. But I told them, I said, that's something really great you guys should brag about. Like that's something that your employees should know.
I would go back one quick thing, Lulu. Yeah. I think Janice, I would also, you know, like managers, having them feel confident in knowing how those ranges work is key. And maybe just even being able to say, we use ranges and this is what that means, is helpful without having to display everything.
Laura asked a good question. Can you speak more on the approach of posting one rate? Would it be acceptable, for example, for a restaurant to post what a consistent starting hourly rate is for an entry-level frontline role, knowing that if someone has deep experience, is hired for a specialty job, etc., they may actually be paid more? This is a super complicated question. The laws say that you have to post a minimum and maximum salary if a minimum and maximum salary exists. If there's flexibility on the rate, you have to post a range. If there's no flexibility on the rate, you post that one range. Now, if, for example, you guys get, maybe the roles get like incentive benefits. So like maybe they get an extra $1 for doing X job or an extra 50 cents for doing Y job an hour. You can post those on your benefits, but I would be really careful in just posting starting rates, whether it's a starting salary or starting hourly range. We've been seeing lawsuits coming about that because if there's flexibility in the amount, you have to post a beginning and end. If there's no flexibility, no negotiation, you can post that one rate. I hope that's helpful.
please. Oh, it is. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Please add more questions in. I was going to share this. Lulu did say, you know, we are here to help you. And this is kind of all of the areas of the journey to fair and transparent pay that PayScale can support you in and geek out with you about. So
Geek out is the proper word.
yeah,
Actually,
right.
there was one thing I wanted to mention. I don't know if any of y'all were at the World at Work conference in San Diego, but there is a statistic that stands out to me that I can't get out of my head, which is, so I'm an elder millennial. I'm on the older end of millennials. But the statistic was by 2030, so like 6 years from now, 30% of the workforce will be Gen Z. And Gen Z are those people like Hannah on TikTok who are wanting to talk all about their pay. So I think I'm preaching to a choir here, but if your ELTs and executive teams are not bought into this idea yet, that is something that I think would be really helpful for y'all to bring up, which is if we want to be competitive in the workforce and we're going to be hiring all these Gen Zers, this is the expectation now that we can no longer hide the ball. And if you're in Illinois, you won't be able to hide the ball. You can hide the ball for the next year, but after 2025, you won't be able to hide the ball anymore. So just an extra little nugget if y'all need extra if your teams need extra convincing.
It's not a Q&A, but I'll offer a little bit about our journey at FTI. And the slides that you put out there around this state and then this state and then this state eventually just drove our executives crazy and our recruiters crazy. And they said, we're just going nationwide. And so we went nationwide in November of 22 with pretty, good results in that there wasn't a lot of noise, right? So I think that's certainly is a policy option that you can consider that says, I can either come back to you every year and add 3 more states and keep being complicated, or just go nationwide. And what we're trying to do is with the EU legislation coming forward in 2024, we're going to get ready to go live in 2025 to do the same thing globally, right? Okay, let's not do death by 1,000 cuts in the US. And now we've got Cayman Islands, and we've got India, and we've got Japan, and we've got Australia, and we've got the EU. Let's just start at least putting salary ranges on postings globally using the same methodology and framework that you all are already comfortable doing. Now let's just do the work of expanding those training materials to a broader audience. Internally is where we have the work to do, right? In terms of actually talking to employees about it. But that's a little bit of what I can offer around. If you want to avoid death by 1,000 cuts, just rip off the Band-Aid and do it globally or nationwide.
I think, and we're seeing a lot of our customers do the same thing. The one thing we tell our customers who are global employers is be prepared, especially in the EU, to finagle your process a little bit once each individual country decides to come out with their own laws. But I think that's a great process moving forward because you're going to do the heavy lifting up front, and then you'll just have to do little minor tweaks as each country passes their own laws. But yes, we are seeing a lot of our like Fortune 500 companies just say, screw it, we're just going to do it everywhere. Like it's too complicated.
I had another question in the chat that I don't know if you saw, so I wanted to ask it if that's okay.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Susan Melcher. I'm the Vice President of Toll Rewards for the Medical College of Wisconsin. So my employer's in Wisconsin. I'm actually based in Illinois. Wisconsin's probably not going to pass the pay transparency law for who knows. It's not even, I think, making its way in the legislature. So but my question was, because we hire a lot of faculty positions in other states, but they actually do relocate to Wisconsin. So the position's based in Wisconsin, but we're recruiting nationally. So I don't know if any of the state laws where we might be recruiting from would require us to post the range because they're living there.
No, if they have to relocate, then that takes you out of it. Okay. If you're just generally looking for workers and they can work from the comfort of their own home in California or Washington or whatever, then yes, you have to post ranges. But if you're requiring them, if the job is required to be performed in Wisconsin, you don't have to. Okay.
And then relative to Illinois, so what I understood you explained about the Illinois law. So I have a whole team that most of them are in Wisconsin. I'm in Illinois. Our actually head of HR is also based in Illinois. So if either of us are hiring Because we're
For
in
Illinois.
Illinois for our team, even if the position's in Wisconsin, we have to post the range because we're based in Illinois.
Do you have 15 or more employees in Illinois right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so then you would have to. So even if they're
Okay.
working in Wisconsin and they're reporting to you, the law says as long as you report to either a supervisor or work site in Illinois,
Right.
even if they're working in Alaska, you have to post the
Okay.
range.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. It's very confusing, but those are good questions.
Thank you.
The last thing I'll drill in on is the definition of good faith, right? That's the fun one. I've worked at a couple of different employers, and one of them were, both of them were encouraging use of the full range, not the hiring range, not the first half of the range. Both of those legal teams ended up landing with, you should post the full range to give that exceptional opportunity a voice, because who gets hired into that exceptional opportunity area? Well, white men, right? And so therefore we should make sure that we let people know that there is that room to negotiate up if you do choose to allow it, right? So, and one of them came out and said that the good faith is literally the salary range you use for that person or that position in your annual compensation planning process. That's the one that the leaders see. That's what you're going to administer them on. What would you consider them to be an outlier? That's the range. And, depending on the complexity of your structure, that's 181 different ranges across 5 different geo tiers and all this. And one employer that I worked with said, yes, that's the level of detail this needs to be. That's what good faith means to us. And then another legal team was on the other side and was like, well, I mean, good faith can mean a lot of things. So as long as you do a reasonable minimum and a reasonable maximum, you can group skill sets together. You can group geographies together. Think about Chicago versus other areas in Illinois. You can group them together and you can come up with a 50 to 250 or maybe a 85 to 250 type of a range. That's where one legal team landed. And then the legal team landed is like, no, literally, if it's 111 to 118, you have to post 111 to 118. So Lulu's giving you some non-advice advice. Your own legal team may land in a variety of places on this spectrum, is what I'll say,
Yeah, and I would say I like to tell this story. One of my dear friends from high school is a manager at Apple in Cupertino. And when the laws in California first came out, he's texting me like, this is such a pain. I'm trying to hire for software engineers and I don't know where to start. So I'm just going to post $90,000 to $325,000. And I said, what? I was like, talk me through that. What does that mean? And he said, well, we're just looking for software engineers in any range, like a 1 through a lead. And I said, cool. Okay, you can post that wide ass range, but you're going to get sued. And maybe a better idea is if you want to just post one job description, underneath say the software engineer 1 range is this, the software engineer 2 range is this, the lead is this. Same with geographic differentials. At PayScale, we were doing that too. We would post kind of a high cost range. So the Seattle, Boston, Chicago, New York, LA range, and then a national range, which was everybody else. And then we just said, that was too much effort. So now everyone is a high cost range. So we call it a national range, but everyone is going to be, whether you live in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, or you live in San Francisco, that is the range, period. So.
All right. Well, I think we'll be respectful of their time and say thank you for
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu. Thank you, Liz. Follow us on Chicago Comp. Follow them through PayScale. And thank you, everyone.